This past year has been a year of battles, and all of us, in one capacity or another, have gone through some form of a battle, a conflict, confrontation. It could span from the physical to the financial to the relational, just dealing with COVID. Even if your entire year was going relatively smooth, just dealing with this COVID crisis creates a sense of battle. And the question really is, how do we embrace the battles of life? Because this is something that is going to be common for all of us. No one escapes here without engaging in some sense of conflict throughout the course of life. To think that you don't or won't go through struggles is really looking at life through a very unrealistic lens. And the real question is, how do we embrace this conflict? How do we embrace these battles? Very often when we think of confrontation, the first thing that comes to mind is negativity. We think, oh my goodness, my world is coming to an end, everything is being threatened, whether it be my health, my finances, my relationship, my marriage, my kids, whatever the case may be. That's normally the immediate worldly perception of battles. But we see here in the book of Exodus a very different perspective. And I'd like to explore Exodus 17, verses 8 through 16, which is really a story about a battle. But it's a battle that points us to a victory and to some very potent, poignant steps that we could be taking as we face battles ourselves. So let's take a look. Exodus 17, verses 8 through 16. Then Amalek came and fought against Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, "Choose men for us and go out and fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." Joshua did as Moses told him and fought against Amalek, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. So it came about when Moses held his hand up that Israel prevailed, and when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy. Then they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other. Thus his hands were steady until the sun set. So Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this in a book as a memorial and recite it to Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." Moses built an altar and named it, "The Lord is my banner." And he said, "The Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war against Amalek from generation to generation." I'll stop right there. We find here, this is a story that takes place during the journey through the wandering along the Sinai Peninsula. The Exodus has occurred. The Israelites have left Egypt. They've experienced a great deliverance. However, they're wandering through the desert here because they've disobeyed the Lord. They were unfaithful, and now they're going to wander for 40 years. And during that time period, we have this battle that takes place. The Amalekites are going to come down and wage war against Israel. And the Amalekites are a tribe that lives in the southern desert, sort of in between the Sinai Peninsula and Israel. I've got a map here for you to show you where I'm talking here about this particular tribe. And the Israelites are down here in the bottom of the Sinai Peninsula when this story takes place. They're in Rephidim. The Amalekites live up here. But this is basically where they're going to conquer and come into conquest the promised land up top there. And the Amalekites, we don't know a whole lot about them. We believe that they're descendants of Esau. They were a belligerent people. They attacked the Israelites without any provocation whatsoever. And some believe that the reason why they attacked, they actually marched. They came from way up here, and they marched all the way down. That's probably about 200 miles through a desert to attack them at Rephidim. And it's probably because the Amalekites are Bedouin. They're nomads. They wander around with their sheep and their goats and chickens, whatever else they have. And they may be heading into the Sinai Peninsula. And Rephidim is a place of water. It's one of those few places. The Sinai Peninsula, when you look at it, it's just this one giant desert. And there's not a lot there. There's very little shrubbery. But down in the bottom there in Rephidim, that means actually literally a place of springs. So there's some springs and water that's flowing through there. It's very lush. It's very rich. It's a very good place to water your critters. And this is where the Israelites were camped. And this is why they attacked them there. The whole reason behind the battle is that they're looking to ensure their own security. They're looking to wipe out this nation that may come in and invade their territory, and as a result, they're going to destroy the Israelites and preserve the oasis, this area of water in the Sinai Peninsula. So that's probably why they're attacking here. It could be out of fear, it could be out of self-preservation, and this is what takes shape here in the storyline. And we find that as the battle is about to take place, Moses speaks to Joshua and says, get some men, muster the army, we're going to go out, we're going to meet these guys head on, and they're going to fight all day long. And we find that because of this act of aggression, the Amalekites are now going to be cursed in the Bible. Deuteronomy actually says that they're supposed to be wiped out, just completely annihilated because of this act. It was just so egregious in the eyes of God. And what we find here is this battle is about to ensue. A physical battle is going to take place in a physical place down here in the southern part of the Sinai Peninsula. And when we think about battles, some of ours are physical. And we wrestle with things that we could see. It could be a health problem. There's all sorts of issues that we're facing. COVID would be considered a physical battle that we're wrestling with. We have relational battles. I got to battle a fly up here that's trying to land on my head, so he's going to lose. So anyway, we have relational battles. And there's conflict. And you put 3 people in a room and you get 4 different opinions, and and that happens often. There's a lot of conflict that is going to happen around the kitchen table. It's going to happen at the water cooler at work. It's going to happen on the ball field. It's going to happen in the schoolyard. It's going to happen everywhere we go, even in church. You put a bunch of people together, what's going to happen? There's going to be differing opinions. There's going to be conflict. We also have financial battles. I mean, this is a big one, and a lot of people are going through that this year. Wrestling with the finances. Where do we spend our money? Where do we just having money? That could be an even a greater issue for some of us, with the fact that businesses are shutting down and people have been out of work and laid off and the like. And so we have the battles, what I call on the surface, and those are the ones that many of us are facing even now. But there's also battles beneath the surface, and these are the things that nobody sees. It could be guilt. It could be your past. It could be a failure. It could be simply depression or anxiety, or even loneliness. I was watching a short video clip. There is this town, I think it's somewhere out in Ohio, Indiana, somewhere out in the Midwest. And during World War II, a group of guys who had graduated high school together, they all enlisted in the Army. Just a whole bunch of them, the whole class just decided to go off and fight for our country. And some of them didn't come back, but many of them did. They fought in Europe and Japan and the like, and they were involved with this. But when they came back, many of these guys ended up staying in the same hometown. And they got their jobs, and they met their wives, and they raised their families. And every Veterans Day, this group of guys from this class in this high school would march in the Veterans Day parade. And every year, they would have the different veterans from the different wars in different sections of the parade. So you had, the guys from World War I and World War II and Korea and Vietnam and so on down the line. Well, as time went on, that group began to shrink from World War II. And just this past year, there was the parade was hosted. It was on Veterans Day, and they had the different groups from the different wars and campaigns were out there. But this year, there was just one man. He was in his mid-90s. He still was able to ambulate, but he was this one man from World War II who was still alive, and he marched in the parade. And as he was marching, streams of water was coming from his eyes. He was the last survivor. And you saw this guy, and he's walking down the street by himself. And everybody on the sidewalk is standing, they're applauding him, they're honoring him, they're trying to show some sense of respect to this veteran. And the whole time he's just weeping as he's going down the street because he knows he's the last one. And I'm thinking to myself, the battle's not over for this guy. He left Normandy years ago, but the fight now he is wrestling with is the loneliness. It's the isolation. It's just knowing he's the last one in his group. And that wrestling match continues for this man just to this day. These battles that we face, whether they be physical, whether they be beneath the surface, really stem back to a deeper battle. And that's what we see here in the story of Joshua and the Amalekites. It's a spiritual battle. And there's multiple layers of need. Notice here, Joshua needs Moses in order to fight the battle. Moses needs Aaron and Hur in order to pray for the battle. There's these multiple tiers in the storyline that we find coming to the surface. In order for this victory to be secured physically on the literal field, something has to happen spiritually behind the scenes. And this is where Moses is lifting up his hands, and this is a posture of prayer. This is him interceding and crying out to God for Joshua, who is out there in the thick of the battle. And we find here Moses needed Aaron. Aaron, as you know, is his brother. He is a high priest. He is connected to the whole Aaronic line that's going to be throughout Scripture. Hur is somebody. Hur is a him, by the way. I just want you to know that. And Hur is it's actually pronounced like her, like you got to cough something out. But I'm not going to ask you to repeat it because I don't want you to spit all over the place. But Hur is one one of these royal families. He's going to crop up here in the Scriptures, and his grandson is actually going to appear as being one of the key artisans who is going to be responsible for crafting things in the tabernacle. And Hur will appear. The family of Hur is going to appear in royalty and in the influence of that upper echelon in Israel throughout much of their history. And this family is going to be sort of quiet behind the scenes, but there nonetheless. And then, of course, we have the great story Ben-Hur, and that one comes out later on down the line. And it's a great movie, by the way. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching it. The old one is great with Charlton Heston. The newer, there's actually a Canadian version of Ben-Hur. It's absolutely fantastic. It came out a few years back. So anyway, so you got Hur out there, and the two of them are doing what? They're propping up Moses. They're helping Moses. There's this direct correlation between the hands of Moses and the heart of Moses and what's taking place on the battlefield. And what we see here is really repeated again in the book of Timothy, where Paul says, I want men to what? Lift up holy hands in prayer and in praise. And really the question is, why would you put your hands up like this? This posture is a little unusual. Why would we do something like this? And the answer, the explanation really has everything to do with the palms. That we would raise our palms, literally like this, up to God, to show that there's nothing between me and God. The reflection of the palm was a reflection of the heart. And when we're called to lift up holy hands in prayer, that we're to have fellowship with God and communion with God and interaction with God, and there's to be nothing in between us and the Lord. And once that fellowship is established, then we could experience the blessing and the unique power and wisdom and guidance and all that He has to offer us, because we're in right relationship with Him. And this is what's taking place here. And this assistance, the thing that I find so remarkable about this passage is that Moses can't do it. Despite the fact that he loves Joshua, he loves the people of Israel, he wants to see this battle come out and turn out okay, no matter how hard he tries, no matter what he does, he cannot keep his hands up. And let's face it, neither can we. I mean, physically speaking, that is a difficult task. And what has to happen? In order for Moses to be victorious in prayer, he needs two men to come alongside of him and help him through, and prop him up and get him on a stone and be able to get his in position. And now they hold him. Now you think about that for a moment. The humility that Moses needed to exhibit at that moment in time. He couldn't do it on his own. And he had to come to that realization that he couldn't even pray effectively for the people, for the warriors out there. And lives are on the line. I mean, this is life and death for these men. The nation of Israel is at stake here. What happens if Joshua loses? You ever think about that? What happens if the Amalekites break through? I mean, you have an entire population of people that are totally vulnerable. You have men, women, children, flocks, herds, the whole 9 yards. And these people are coming down here, and they could wipe them out. Everything is at stake, and Moses knows it. And he's growing tired, and he's growing weary. And he has these two faithful men who come to his side and help him through the day. There's a few critical truths that we need to recognize in this passage. Number one of the most critical pieces here is that we do not battle against flesh and blood. We do not battle against flesh and blood. This passage illustrates for us something that we find in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 14. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against powers, against world forces of darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in heavenly places. There lies the battle. It is not a physical battle. It is spiritual, number one. Number two, the battlefield very often is the mind. The battlefield is the mind. Think about it for a moment. Our actions very often are a reflection of what happens what? In the head and the heart. What I do and how I interface with my world is directly connected with what's going on between these two ears of mine and what's happening in my soul. The battlefield we find here in 2 Corinthians chapter 10 is this: for though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. We are destroying speculations and every lofty thing raised up against, here it is, the knowledge of God. And we are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. The battle is spiritual, the battlefield is the mind, and the victor is God. We find in 1 Samuel that the battle per David belongs to the Lord. 1 Samuel 17, the great story of David and Goliath, where we have these two armies out on the battlefield, ready to ensue. It is physical, it is nitty, it is gritty. The Israelites are shaking in their boots, they're running back, they're recoiling. Every time Goliath comes out and taunts the army of Israel, they run away. Saul is cowering with them. They are wondering who in the world is ever going to come out and be our champion and take out Goliath and win this day against the Philistines. And what happens? The young shepherd David comes out from the sheepfold. He goes out onto the battlefield, and this is what he says before he slays Goliath. Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and remove your head from you, and I will give the dead bodies of the army of the Philistines to the day to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not deliver by sword or by spear." And here he says it, "For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." It is spiritual, it is internal, it is won through Christ. And we find that at the end of the day, Joshua is victorious, and what God instructs Moses to do after the battle is very critical for us to grasp. He asks Moses to erect an altar there, and he calls it, "The Lord is my banner." It's Yahweh Nisi, literally in Hebrew. It's a flag. That seems like a strange thing. Why would you talk about a flag in the middle of this whole piece? And the reason behind it is, think about flags for a moment. Think about banners. They represent something. Our flags here represent something. They're symbolic of our nation. When we talk about flags, there's richness to what is on that piece of cloth there. When we look at the American flag over here, you have what? The stars representing each of the states. The 13 stripes representing the 13 original colonies. White represents purity, virtue. Red represents valor. Some people will even say it may represent the blood of those who made sacrifices. I remember when I was in school, one of my teachers said that to us. Blue is representative of justice. What happens when we see that flag in battle scenes? It's symbolic. It's a rallying point. It's a reminder. It's meant to stir the heart. It's meant to inspire. It's meant to help us remember things. It is designed to be that point of focus to say, hey, here's something that represents a great victory. Excuse me, the Star-Spangled Banner. You may remember the story back when you were in high school, when you were learning about Francis Scott Key and Fort McHenry, and what the flag was still there. That great line as everybody's looking up and they said, the fort was still in American hands, then the flag represented that. Some of you may recall the story of Iwo Jima when the guys are raising the flag there, and there was this symbolism that this territory had been captured. 9/11, another beautiful picture. You had those firefighters raising that flag. We're still victorious, even though we've been attacked. It was this memorial. It was something for us to focus upon, something to rally us, something to help us to recenter our attention. And this is what God has for Moses. He says, I want you to put this altar here, name it Yahweh Nisi, so that no one will forget. Because in future generations, you're going to have more battles. You're going to march into a land and you're going to have battles. You're going to fight disease. You're going to fight people. You're going to fight drought. You're going to fight plagues and pestilences. You're going to fight all sorts of issues. And you're going to need to have these banners erected somewhere in your life to remember the victories, to stir the faith, to recall the blessing, and to fix your focus once again on who is going to be the victor in these struggles in life. This is what's taking place. So what do? Well, expect battles. First thing, we need to expect battles in life, and most of us understand that. We've been around the block long enough. It's part of life, number one. Number two, we need to support one another in prayer. We need each other now more than ever before. I am watching across our country people falling apart, churches falling apart. I was talking to a guy while we were down in New Jersey at the funeral, a church out in eastern Pennsylvania. 2,000 members at the beginning of this year. Mega church, 20 members on their staff. This fellow was telling me they're averaging 150 people on a Sunday morning. They've lost over 90% of their membership. They're going to fire almost everybody on staff. There's a battle here. There's a major conflict that's taking place. And we see it everywhere we look. And if there's ever a moment in time when the church has to rally together and support one another on an individual basis and on a congregational basis, it is right now. It couldn't be more ripe of a time for us to realize the need for each other. And we need to set up banners. We need to remember, historically speaking, that God has carried his people through. That this is not the first time in the course of Christendom where the church has come under attack, where people have been divided, where there has been problems, when there has been plagues and pestilences and pressure from without. This is not something new or unique to Christianity. It may be unique to us because we've gone through an unprecedented period of peace. We've gone through and lived in a country where there was very little opposition to Christianity, but that day is over. And we can expect more of that to occur. In fact, we should anticipate it. Therefore, we need one another. We need to pray. We need to support. We need to encourage. We need to look beyond our pettiness and our opinions and recognize that our survival as individuals and as a congregation is hinged upon the power of prayer. 2020, for us on a personal level, was by far the most difficult year we have ever faced. My in-laws moved in with us. My father-in-law required extensive care. He was on a feeding tube, a catheter. He was bedbound. He couldn't walk. He took so many our kitchen counter was filled with medicines. Thousands of dollars of medicines were coming to our house every month just to keep him alive. We had home health aides coming in, all of the logistics of having to deal with him. My son lost a job this spring. My second son, my youngest son, had to go through a surgery. My mother-in-law had to go through a surgery. My wife has been diagnosed with cancer. You want to talk about stress? My dog picked up on the stress level all right? Now, I don't know if you know that, but dogs have this innate ability to read human emotion. There was a study done in Hungary years back, and dogs could read, how you feel. They know if you're anxious, they know if you're upset and everything else. Max would not leave my side all summer long. I mean, I couldn't go anywhere. I was tripping over my dog. Why? Because he knew my stress levels through the roof. Because we were running around, we were dealing with surgeries, and we were dealing with trips to the hospital, dealing with my father-in-law, dealing with this COVID thing. I mean, my brother just the other day, he went in for a quintuple bypass surgery. We weren't sure if he was going to make it to Thanksgiving. Every time we turn around, we've been getting hit and slammed with things. You were our Moses. You were our Aaron and our Hur. As the battles raged over the last 10 months, 11 months, this church family was that to us. I do not know how we could have survived the last ordeal, this entire year, without the care, the encouragement, the support, the cards, the meals, but above all, the prayers that you guys lifted up for us. We experienced miracles that, I could just talk for the rest of the day. We have a phrase that we started to coin in our home this year. It's called threading the needle. This year we watched God thread the needle in ways that no one would have ever imagined. My father-in-law coming here to Vermont. He's sick, he can't stay in the nursing home, he can't go home, he needs a place to stay. He was driven up here on March 1st. He arrived on Vermont soil early in the morning. Friday of that week, they shut his nursing home down. He would have never been able to leave. We know many people in that particular home died in April because of COVID. My mother-in-law would have never been able to see him. Thread the needle. When my son required surgery and he had to have his knee operated on, they opened up the clinic just in time so he could get the surgery, go through recovery, and get back to school, and literally within a couple of days to spare. The amount of time from the moment he went into the hospital to the moment he would finish his recovery to the moment he would leave for Susquehanna was pinpoint perfect. God thread the needle. When my mother-in-law required an operation on her ear, the timing again was absolutely perfect. The growth that she had on her ear was getting to the point where they felt it could metastasize. The hospital just opened up in time. She got in the door just in time. They removed it in time, and it did not turn into any sort of a cancer. God thread the needle. When my wife was diagnosed, the timing and the fact that there was one, she was diagnosed here in Newport, and they were going to send her down to Dartmouth, but they didn't have any beds down there at the time. So we ended up going to University of Vermont Medical Center. And here she is, she's going off to this hospital, and they just opened up the hospital so that visitors can be there and that we could have the treatment and the care and everything lined up at that specific moment in time. And because things were opening and shutting constantly because of COVID. And once again, we thread the needle. After Mary was originally diagnosed, she had a blood clot in her leg, and she has to take blood thinners. And the initial blood thinners she had to take were these shots. And they're very, very expensive. And the pharmacist at UVM Medical brings out this bag of these shots and says, here's a month's supply, and you're going to need them for 3 months now. And you have to inject twice a week to get this blood thinner going because, that's one of the greatest risks that was posing to her health. And but when you come close to running out, you need to call your pharmacy. I sent in the prescription over there, and they have it, but you need to call 3 days ahead of time because it's a very expensive medicine, and they probably don't carry it. So she was going to run out on a Tuesday. Tuesday morning was going to be or Monday night was going to be her last shot. Tuesday she was going to need her meds. So Thursday I figured I'm going to be proactive. I'm going to call up and I'm going to get things rolling. So I call the pharmacy. I tell them about, oh yeah, we got the prescription here, blah, blah, blah. We should have this thing filled by Friday. I call Friday. We can't fulfill your prescription. Oh, what's going on? Oh, we got some problems with the insurance. You got to call the insurance company. So I call the insurance company. I'm on the phone with the insurance. Well, we have a sub-insurance company that's working with this medicine. I'm like, what is that? I mean, when was the last time I've been in the insurance business for years. When do you have like a sub-insurance company covering a specific medicine? Oh yeah, you got a sub-insurance company. You got to go through them, blah, 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 blah. I'm on the phone with them. I got to get referrals. By the time it was Saturday night, we finally got the approval for this medicine that turns out, it costs like $4,000 a month to get this thing. And they tell me right at the end of the conversation, well, we don't work with pharmacies anyway. What are you talking about? I'm like, now, and now of course Max is hanging out by my side, he knows something's going on. And so, well, what do you do? I mean, I got to go to Toledo to find, buy this. How do I get the meds? Oh, we're going to ship them to your house. I'm like, well, that sounds good, but I got one problem. I'm not going to be at my house. They're like, what do you mean? I was like, we have radiation on Monday, and I've got to be in Burlington by Monday afternoon. How can you ship this thing to my house? And back and forth. I was on the phone with them 7 hours. We finalized Monday while we're driving to Burlington. We've got, I'm on the phone with these insurance people. Well, we're going to try to ship it to the hotel where you're staying in Burlington because we're spending the whole week there. Tuesday morning, I get up. Now Mary is out of meds. I walk down to the lobby. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. I look at the manager and said, ma'am, we're expecting a package for my wife and yada, yada, yada. Oh, wait a minute. She goes in the back, she says, is this it? God thread the needle. The meds were there. And every time we turned around, even with my father-in-law, as he was, rapidly declining and his body was shutting down, the day he went to the hospital, the last day we had an opportunity to actually have a conversation with him. Everything timed out just perfectly so Mary could come home and see your dad and be able to converse with him one last time. My father-in-law's final request or desire in life, because he was a Navy veteran, was to vote. It was very important to him. It meant a lot. He served his country, and he felt that voting was extremely important for every person to do. Because they were here in Vermont, they needed to get an absentee ballot, so they got their ballots, filled them out, mailed them in. We come to find out that at least in New Jersey, I don't know how other states work, you need to be alive on the day of the election in order for your ballot to count. He passed away on Veterans Day. Or not Veterans, I'm sorry. That came out wrong. He passed away on Election Day. He made it to the election. I really screwed that up, didn't I? But he lived long enough so that the vote counted. That's God's timing. That's threading that needle. And this is what we've been seeing all year. Miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle. God's timing. And it's only possible through prayer. It's only possible when you have a church family coming underneath and undergirding you with intercession. My Thanksgiving was spent with Mary and my son, Zach. But it was probably one of the best Thanksgivings we had together. And the reason was, as we looked out back at this year filled with battles, there was so much to rejoice in. Are we out of the woods? No. We've got much to go. We have a lot on our horizon. But we have so much to be grateful for. And I remember just all day long, just recollecting, creating that banner in my heart, recollecting the blessings and the power and the provision and the people that God brought into our lives to preach, to help in the home, to, just be there with a meal or to send a card. And I just kept on thanking God for you. And I want to encourage you to keep on keeping on, to be diligent in prayer, because there's others in this room who are going through similar battles, and they need that support. Our church needs that support as we face an uncertain future. But today, we're to give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His love endures forever. Let's take a moment to pray. Father, on this Thanksgiving weekend, as we recollect the bounty and the blessings and the things you've done and the battles we've had to face, I just pray, Father, that each of us would take some time to step back, look beyond the pain, look beyond the pressure, look beyond the uncertainty, the anxiety, and all that we're facing. And I pray, Father, that we would stop to give thanks to you even in the midst of the storm, because you are good, and you are God, and you have everything under control. And I pray, Father, that we would rest in that sovereign plan of yours, that we would recognize that the battle belongs to you. And I am thankful for that this day, and give you praise and glory, and ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Before we sing our final, the fly. He landed on my sermon. I almost put my hand to the pulpit here. The final song we're going to sing, I wanted to share with you the backstory. It's written by a minister named Henry Alford. And Alford was, he's British, and he was the son of a pastor. Actually, he had a whole family of ministers. He came from a very rich background of people in ministry. And at 16, this young guy was sitting in a pew at a church listening to a message, and he opened up his Bible and he wrote on the inside cover that he is going to follow after Christ, and he's going to commit his life to Christ no matter what. And for the next 45 years, this guy was unrelentless in serving Jesus. He became a minister. He wrote poems and songs. He went on to pastor a number of churches. He became one of the most predominant voices for evangelicalism in England during the 1800s. And he was just a fireball. In fact, he actually died due to the fact that he wouldn't stop serving with such zeal that he just wore himself out. And it was actually exhaustion related with what led to his ultimate demise. And everybody was shocked. How do you have somebody for 45 years just give it their all every single day, every single hour, every single minute? I mean, the guy just wasn't, you couldn't stop him. And they were like, what's the secret of this guy's strength? How could he endure and persevere and be able to, just have this sense of zeal for Christ so consistently for so long? And they found that he did something very unique every day. At the end of the day, he would come home, and after they would eat, he would stand up at the dinner table, and he would recollect the blessings of the day. At the end of the day, he'd do the same thing. Every single day, he would stop in front of his family and stand up and lift up his hands and praise the God of Jacob, praise the God of Isaac, praise the God of Abraham, praise the God of the Bible, and offer thanksgiving to God because he was recognizing and seeing that God's hand was upon his life. And it was that constant reminder that propelled him for 45 years through trials and through tribulations, through the ministry, and straight into glory. So this morning we're going to sing Mr. Alfred's song, "Come Ye Thankful People, Come." It's a Thanksgiving classic, and it's a favorite. The words will be right up here on the screen. Would you please stand with me as we conclude our service with this hymn?